Kenyon Martin and Draymond Green are still beefing. Today, Kenyon Martin debated his own legacy when it came to who was a better player, him or Draymond Green on the show Gil's Arena. But how this feud started originally was because Kenyon Martin said straight up that Draymond Green was a fake tough guy. He was very calculated in who he targeted, and he targeted people he knew that were weak, that were not going to fight back against him, which was correct. No one should even dispute that. It's very true. Draymond targets the weak. He always backs down from guys he knows could take his head off. We've seen a few clips of that where, for example, where he had a confrontation with Isaiah Stewart, where Isaiah grabbed him by the jersey and he didn't want any part with him. And there was a old clip from a long time ago with Meta World Peace in which he backed down to him when he was confronted. Like he was a completely different person. Like he looked like some nice guy who didn't want no part of it, instead of this bully, this thug, that he tries to portray. It's funny how bullies instantly change when they're confronted by someone who's stronger than them. Suddenly they're nice and they're not threatening. But that's another story altogether. So Draymond got pissed off at that. And instead of defending Kenny's accusations about being a fake tough guy, he started insulting Kenyon's career, saying that Kenyon underachieved and he's the better player than Kenyon. And then this opened up a war of words between these two, where Kenyon responded back by saying that there are 50 players at the power forward position who were better than him. And I had to say Kenyon was being generous. If we were being honest, we could probably find a list of like 100 guys at the power forward position who are better than Draymond. Just had to throw that out there. But now there's a debate on who was better. Obviously, Draymond can say factually that he had more All-Star games than Kenyon Martin, 4-1. He made more defensive teams, All-NBA defensive teams to Kenyon, while Kenyon never made any All-NBA defensive teams. So I just want to go into this. Kenyon Martin's career averages. Let's look at his career averages for his career. I'm just trying to look for it right now. Kenyon Martin for his career averaged 12.3 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.1 blocks per game on 48% shooting from the field. All right, and let's look at Draymond's career stats. Let's pull them up. Draymond averaged 8.7 points per game, 1 block per game, 1.3 steals per game, 5.6 assists, 6.9 rebounds on 44% shooting from the field, 32 from three. So obviously Kenyon Martin is a better scorer than him. There's no question about that. He's a better scorer. Now, when it comes to every other defensive stat, they're pretty much neck and neck. Draymond's career rebounding average is 6.9, while Kenyon's is 6.8. I do expect that number to decrease as Draymond continues to play. It'll probably be even a little bit less than Kenyon when his career is over. The steals is a little bit higher, that he averaged 1.3 steals per game, while Kenyon averaged 1.2. But Kenyon averaged slightly more blocks, but 1.1 to 1. So it's like really, really identical when it comes to their defensive stats. The one stat where Draymond does blow him out of the water is passing. So we'll give Draymond that. He was a better passer than Kenyon. But everything else, to me, is very close statistically, defensively, like I said, and Kenyon's a better scorer. So now it really comes down to context. I would say that when Kenyon was playing, when he was at his best with those Nets teams, he was their second best player. He was the second best player on those Nets teams that made it to the playoffs and made it to those finals, the one team that had Kidd in him on there. And I know some people are going to say like, well, Jason Kidd just made him look good and made him a better player than what he was. Sure, you could argue that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he was number 2 in scoring during every season he was with the Nets team. When he played with Kidd for 3 straight seasons, he was number 2 in scoring on that team. So that means he was very valuable. Not everybody can even be a number two scoring option in the NBA because defenses are also focused on stopping the number two. They're geared towards that also. There's a lot of focus. So that means he had to be somewhat good, at least an above average player to pull that off offensively. And you look at the numbers he was getting, he was having seasons where he's averaging 16.7 points per game, 8.3 rebounds. Then another one where he averaged 16.7 points per game and 9.5 rebounds. So the man was averaging a near double double, and he was shooting high percentages, 47, 48% from the field. And and like I said, people want to say he was only good because of Jason Kidd, but I still think he had a huge impact on that team winning games. Grant Kidd was the main guy, no doubt about it. But for example, you look at the Nets when they got rid of him. He left as a free agent in the summer of 2004, and the Nets ended up winning less games the next year without him. They went from a team that won 47 games to 42. And I know some people are going to say, like, well, that's only a 5 game drop off. It didn't mean much. And I think there's a lot of context that needs to be revealed about that, which is that Nets team, they started off that season very poorly without Kenyon. They actually started out that season, when I'm looking at their old win-loss record, with a 3-12 start. So they started the season with 3 wins, 12 losses. That's how much they missed Kenyon Martin. And it didn't get much better. At one point in time, they were like 15-25 during the regular season. So some people are going to wonder, like, how did they turn around their season? They made a desperate trade and they got Vince Carter, who was still a star player. And that's how they were able to finish the season above 500. So that shows you that losing Kenyon was a huge void that they had to fill, and they really needed to fill it. So he cannot be a bum if a team struggles that much without him, that they had to make a trade to get a legit star to come in there. That actually was a big mistake they made by not re-signing Kenyon Martin, in the sense that I remember how upset Kidd was at the time about that. He felt that really led to the downfall of the Nets no longer being an elite team in the East. So I will say this, that he was a really good player, a number two option on an elite team in the East. And just, yeah, like I said, that's hard to do, is be a second option. That's something Draymond Green, if we're being honest, would never have been able to fill that role. He would have never been able to do that. I think those Nets teams don't even get to the finals if they have Draymond instead of Kenyon Martin, because Draymond could not be a guy who could provide scoring in that situation. He would have been pretty much useless to them. I know some people are going to say, like, well, what about his defense? His defense is elite. His defense is elite in this era, and it's elite in this era because the refs allow him to play 90s defense. They allow Draymond to grab, hack, and hold guys and get away with it, where every player was allowed to play that type of defense during the 90s and early to mid 00s. And I know some people are going to say, like, well, if everybody was able to do that back then, why are you hating on Draymond being able to do this now? Yeah, I'm hating on him for being able to do this because he's the only guy who's allowed to play this type of elite defense, and to play the old school defense, while everybody else has to play by another set of rules. They had to play by the new rules, while Draymond gets to play by the old rules. So that shows you why he looks so good in this era. But in the previous era, he would just be another average player. They were role players off the bench who did the same type of defense as Draymond did back then. They were hacking, grabbing, holding players, and doing all that stuff. But they couldn't be starters because they couldn't score. So they were bench players. That's who Draymond would have been during the 90s and early to mid 2000s. And hence why he would not have been able to really fill that role and rolling well with Kenyon, replacing him with the Nets, because the Nets would have actually needed scoring. They wouldn't need the defense. They could find plenty of guys who could play defense like Draymond back then. So that's definitely my argument in that regard. He would have been useless. Now, when you look at the Warriors, I know people are going to say, like, well, though the Warriors wouldn't have had that success if they had Kenyon on their team. I actually think they would have had the same amount of success with Kenyon that they had with Draymond. Kenyon was a really good offensive player. He was a lob threat. He had a good mid-range jump shot. he actually probably would provide them with more offense. So they don't lose much on the offensive end. Now they would miss Draymond's playmaking. I will say this, but I think they can overcome the lack of playmaking from Draymond, and they would still be fine. They would be able to still be able to run most of their plays by moving the ball around. Steph, Clay are high IQ players. And on top of that, Kenyon was also an enforcer, so they're not going to miss Draymond's toughness. Kenyon was one of the toughest guys during his era. He was a guy who gave out a lot of flagrant fouls during the early 2000s. I remember that it got to a point where Stern actually threatened him that he needed to stop giving flagrant fouls. So Kenyon was a tough guy. He was an enforcer. So the Warriors would not miss Draymond's toughness because they would have it in Kenyon. Plus, they would have a better scorer. So I think the Warriors would have still won with Kenyon Martin. That there would have been no change. But if you switch Draymond in Kenyon's place and he played on the teams Kenyon played on, those teams would have been worse. I think those Nets teams never get a whiff of the finals with Draymond on there. They may even struggle to get into the playoffs with Draymond in there. I think they would have been worse off. And even if they get to the finals, they're still going to lose with Draymond. But the embarrassment would have been worse, I think. Granted, they still get swept by the Lakers, but I think they get swept by the Spurs also in 04 instead of just losing in 6 games. So there's that. And when you go back to even the career retrospective of both of these guys, Kenyon played a more competitive era when it came to the big man position, the power forward position, the center position. That's a big reason why he was in less All-Star games, if we're being honest. Like, you look at the Western Conference when he got sent to the West through free agency, the West was loaded with power forwards. You had Tim Duncan, you had Kevin Garnett, you had Dirk Nowitzki, you had Pau Gasol, you had Elton Brand. Those guys were all legit 20 and 10 players. So you're not taking any of those guys' spots during the 2000s. It was that intense. And then you had another guy in Sean Marion who was getting 20 and 10. And then you had Amari Stoudemire. So it was hyper competitive. There's no way Draymond whiffs an All-Star game in the West during that time period. Not happening. Just no chance. He's not getting in there. And then when it comes to even all defensive teams, I don't see Draymond whiffing an all defensive team. Well, maybe he gets. Nah, I just don't. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't, because Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan were getting all the power forward spots for the defensive team back then. And then you had guys like Ron Artest and Bruce Bowen taking up the remaining spots. It was hyper competitive to get those spots. Whereas I felt during Draymond's era, there was not much competition for those spots like there was during Kenyon's era. So people will bring that in. But I know some people will say I'm a hater, I'm discrediting him, but that's just how I feel. So the final thing I would say about this comparison of who's the better player, you got to ask yourself, if you're building a team from scratch, you have a garbage lottery team. Let's say you have the Charlotte Hornets, like some really bad team. Who do you put in there, Draymond or Kenyon? I'm going to start off with Kenyon because I'm guaranteed to get a guy who's going to average around 15 to 17 points, get me 8-10 rebounds, provide me some really good defense. Whereas with Draymond, the only way he can be successful if I have a bad team, well, he can't be successful with a bad team because his offense is such a liability that he's not playable. Guys can easily cheat off of him on defense and guard the other guys. If I have a bad team, there's no Steph Curry or Clay to space the floor. So I don't have all-time elite shooters. So the defense can easily key on him. So he's pretty much useless then because he can't set up the plays simply because he doesn't have the guys to space the floor. So he's more of a situational role player than Kenyon is. Kenyon, I would say, at one point in time in his career, he was an above average player that you could slide into just about any team. That it doesn't matter what team it is, and he's still going to give you good numbers. But with Draymond, he's always been an elite role player. If the team is not stacked, he doesn't put up good numbers. that was very clear that one year where Clay Clay was out for the whole entire year and Kevin Durant had left them and it was just him and Curry. He failed miserably in that situation. Hence, when Curry got hurt, he faked an injury so he didn't have to play the rest of the year. You're not going to get that with Kenyon. Kenyon is still going to be a good player regardless of who's around him. He's still going to be at least above average when healthy. So that's the way I look at it. So that's just my final thoughts about the subject. I just wanted to make this video so I can refer back to in the past if anybody wants to debate this. So yeah, there you have it.